we have a conversation with my girlfriend now, and it's kind of crazy the parenting styles of what you grew up with and what she grew up with and how you want to handle it. And her kids are young, and she's kind of been like, hey, have at it. I'm not like take them as your kids, and it's been awesome. But I'm like, hey, just let him. Like her son is the youngest, and he's 5 next week. But he's used to being babied, and I'm like, babe, you got to stop this. And so it's just like, rub a little dirt on it. And she seemed like, wow, this is different. Like, I don't need to run over them. He's fine. A minute later, he just wants that attention. Yeah. I think we talked like the helicopter parent, the parents who are just running over to the kid on the soccer field. He's running onto the field when he's just like a simple ankle or something like that. Then back in the game in a minute. There's just no need for that. I feel like we don't want to raise kids that way, and we can make them learn so much more if they can just figure that out for themselves and learn what their limits are. I think that makes a huge difference when they're young.
Yeah, completely agreed. And I think that, and this is a slight generalization, but I think that's generally like the difference between moms and dads as well, right? There's a balance between there. Is the mom's usually the more protective in the I don't want them to get hurt, where the dad's the more protective in the I want to keep them safe, right? Which is different. Not wanting them to get hurt is very different than wanting to keep them safe, because you could be hurt and still be safe, right? So, so it's a matter of like, how do we balance those two? And you already alluded to it. One thing I talk about constantly is the ability to communicate between the mom and the dad, the husband and the wife. Like if you can't communicate back and forth between each other, then you guys are always going to be on different paths because you haven't discussed what path you're supposed to be on. Like whether it's the overreacting or whether it's the whatever. And you don't want it to be an argument between the two. You want to realize that there's a balance. Like when there's a time that they're hurt, like like they're legitimately injured. Okay, like we jump in and we go. But if they're just hurt, like they twisted their ankle, they'll be fine. Like they'll get back up. They'll keep going. Like it's part of the process of growing up. And it makes us a little bit more resilient as we grow up too, which it seems to be a problem in society today. Resilience is not like victimization is good. Resilience is not, and that baffles my mind. Like I don't understand why we all want to be a victim, but like nobody wants to be resilient. But I don't know. It's a weird society we're in right now.
Yeah, no one's going to do it but yourself. Like you got to figure out a way to push through, and you're not going to have these crutches to lean on as you get older. So yeah, I think it's great conversations to have with your kids and building that resiliency. Works.
So speaking of resiliency, I can't leave the resiliency conversation without talking about the mortgage world at the moment, right? Your world and what you're dealing with, right? So let's kind of fast forward. How did you get into the mortgage business? How did you kind of lead down that path?
Yeah. So I went to Penn State and graduated a little after 9/11 with a finance degree. And coming out, I did okay in school. I'm not the greatest student, but came out and to put a couple sentences together and get in front of some recruiters, and got offers from like the big wirehouses and things like that. I'm like, cool, just bring a list of your friends and family, and we're gonna call them and ask them for money and to invest with you. And I'm like, oh, that sounds horrible. I ended up falling into this local mortgage company, this chop shop up the street, right as rates were coming down. They were hitting like 6.5 at that point. And went with them, and it was crazy. We rode that all the way down into like the low 3s, which was crazy. We'd never thought we'd see that again until a couple years ago. But so it was in there, and I was getting paid $250 a loan. And it's crazy to be compared to now owning a brokerage and what that is. And in the fourth month, I set a company record. It was just a call center type thing. And I made $10,000. I thought I was rich. I was like, I'm going to retire now. This is in 1 month, $10,000. This is crazy. And so we ran through the ups and downs of that, and of my own shop a couple years ago after going through the meltdown and all the craziness of being with a couple different lenders, and always kind of running my own branch of a bigger company. Eventually just pulled the trigger and opened my own shop a couple years back and hit that right before COVID. And it's been awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of ups and downs, it seems, inside of your tenure, right? I mean, if you're talking like back the early 2000s, starting this process, what sort of things did you see on these? I mean, there's a lot of people listening right now that probably haven't done much. Maybe they went through like '08, maybe if they were really investing back then or had a business back then, but probably not, right? So Like, how did you kind of look at it from an employee perspective and then apply that now to as the broker / owner perspective? Like, what did you learn through those ups and downs that you're now applying in your business?
Yeah, you just got to be able to pivot. When I first started, all my relationships were with financial advisors and accountant CPAs, because we were riding the refinance wave down. So we were going from 6%, then refinancing. I think I refinanced my in-laws 3 times at that point, from 6 and then at 5. And then I think I got them down at 3% at one point. And then that went away and rates started coming back up. So I had to switch to then learning to purchase business. So then all my relationships moved over from, while still maintaining those relationships, you've got to find another source. So then I started going after realtors, and that was my source of business. When I really went out on my own, I still kind of rode the people feeding me beads for early in my career. But once I really went out on my own and had own branches of bigger companies, I bet those relationships were important. And yeah, you just had to be kind of comfortable. At one point, I even thought I was going to get my real estate license when things were really slow. I sat for my real estate license or training, never pulled the trigger on it. But I was like, okay, let's get into full-time investing and things like that. But then rates started coming back a little bit. I was like, nah, I can do much better in mortgages and have the real estate on the side. And that worked out with.
Okay. And when was that you were talking about doing that?
So that was probably 2010.
Okay.
After the meltdown, I thought I was going to become like a full-time real estate investor. And
yeah.
So then mortgages started coming back. I kind of found it another niche. I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. Let's just focus. That's the main thing. And there's a lot of money to be made in mortgages, and I'm glad I stayed.
Yeah, and I think that it goes to the thought process of, you mentioned pivoting, but it wasn't necessarily pivoting out of what your core focus is. You still had a core focus. You just pivoted how you executed within that core focus. So you don't have to go learn a whole new thing and all this stuff. And that's where, there were so many people for 2017 to 2000, like now. They were always saying or maybe it's starting to change a little bit now. I think I'm seeing the winds change a little bit now, but quit your W-2. Like, I can't believe you have a W-2, quit your W-2 and go do all of these investing things and jump ship and do all this stuff. And it was like, dude, that may work for some people, but it doesn't mean that that's for everybody, right? Like, people have to understand what their situation is, what they want to do, what their focus is, and how they're going to execute their personal life, right? Not just take a cookie cutter approach to all of it. And it, how did you prevent yourself from getting that distraction? Because that was a great time to start getting into real estate. 2010 would have been a wonderful time to get into real estate. So how did you kind of keep yourself away from that shiny object and stay focused on the path that you were on to now become as prosperous as you are in your business?
It's fun. I think the wave came back pretty quick. Like, I was probably just keeping my head above water in the mortgage business when I was working for someone else. And then it came back pretty quick. I think at that time I switched companies and was able to get a bigger piece of the pie. So I didn't have to get more deals. I was just getting a bigger piece. So that helped kind of predict. But then I did have probably a handful of properties at that time, which were going well. So that's why it was alluring, thinking that I could maybe do that full time. But no, I'm glad I stayed. And I think those relationships kicked in, and the realtors started sending me business repeatedly after I had a proven track record. And I think it worked.